Why do most Etsy shops never get consistent sales in 2026? I can tell you it's almost never what people think. It's not saturation, it's not that Etsy is hiding your listings, and it's not that you missed the window to be successful on Etsy. It's really that most Etsy sellers are following outdated advice that was used years ago, and then they blame the platform and say that Etsy doesn't work. So I pulled together the 8 worst pieces of advice that some really smart people are actually still using in 2026. So if you've been grinding and watching nothing happen on Etsy, this video is going to tell you exactly what to stop doing. Etsy is oversaturated. I will tell you, if Etsy were really oversaturated, how are brand new Etsy shops getting their first sales as soon as they open? When people say it's saturated, they're just looking at the number of listings. But all listings are not actually your competition. And most of the listings that you see on Etsy are dead listings. They're noise. So common examples of this are listings that have outdated mockups, photos that are not linked to variations, descriptions that are full ChatGPT descriptions, fonts that were popular 2 years ago, but not this year. And most sellers, they just set up a listing once and then they never touch it again, especially if it ever sells. And that causes search results to look crowded, to look saturated. So today I want you to do this. Go to Etsy and search for something that would be in your shop. Scroll the first couple of pages. Count how many listings actually look like they were created this year. And that number might be closer to the real competition. It's a lot smaller than you think. And that's not even going into the listing to see if the inside is built to convert someone. The second worst piece of advice, you just have to niche down. And this is probably the most repeated advice in the Etsy space. And the problem no one talks about is a niche does not guarantee a profitable customer. Let me show you what I mean by that. So say you go all in on the dog niche. The dog niche could include someone who is maybe just scraping by. They just buy the cheapest dog food that they can find on the shelf at Walmart. They're not brand loyal. That's a very common situation. And then there's someone who has serious disposable income, who buys premium everything for their dog. Designer dog collars, chef gourmet dog food. These are in the same niche, but these are completely different customers. The niche itself did not tell you that you were definitely targeting the profitable customer. And then there's a second trap. You really chain yourself to chasing brand new transactions forever. How many, let's say, dog mugs does one person buy every month? How many plant t-shirts does one person buy every month? Typically, you sell it once and then you're back to square one trying to find the next customer. With a niche, you end up having a lot of one-time buyers. So instead, we want to start over with a customer. Think about a profitable customer, a person with higher disposable income, and how can we serve them for 4 to 7 years in different areas of their life? That's going to mean different products. And I know you're thinking, this is going to look so random. Like, is this a general store? No, we're tying it together with the aesthetic. Because the person who buys for their dog, they might also like plants. They might also be a teacher. So today, I want you to do this. Stop describing your shop by what you sell. Think about describing it by who you serve. And if you can't really name that person, or if you don't know if it's a profitable customer, you probably don't have one yet. You might just have a product-focused shop. The third piece of advice that I think is terrible is more options equals more sales. More variations, more personalization fields, more options. And the instinct for you as a seller is, let me use all of these. Let me capture everyone. But that is the wrong way to think about it, because every option that you add is another decision that you're forcing on the buyer. And decisions are friction. So here you can see a listing with tons of font options. And then you can see a listing with like 4 font options. Which one would be easier for you to buy? Think about how Lululemon does this. They don't give you 40 color options of the same legging. They curate the decisions for you. They curate the options for you. That curation itself is part of the product and part of the customer experience. Someone who had experience made some of those decisions and narrowing down for them, and it makes their decision easier. Curation is not you being lazy or limiting yourself or your product's potential. Curation is work that you do so that the customer doesn't have to do it. So 4 great fonts will out-convert every day 40 mediocre fonts. So today, I want you to do this. Open your best listings and count the number of decisions that you're asking the buyer to make. And then cut the weakest 50% of the options that never sell anyways. And with this, you're not really removing value. You're just removing friction. Now, if you are watching this thinking, wait, I'm doing like 2 or 3 of these, okay, I'm glad. That is the whole point. So stay with me because these next ones are where the real mistakes live. The fourth one is thinking that your best sellers died because someone copied you or undercut you in price. And I get why. It's so much easier to blame another seller for a decrease in your own sales, but it's almost never what actually happened. Let's take a look at 2 listings. This one looks like it's 2023 and this one is a 2026 version. And by looking at this, you can tell what actually happens is aesthetic decay. Your mockups are getting old. Your fonts get stale. They might not be just choosing the cheaper option. Maybe they're choosing the one that looks like it came from this year. So price is rarely why you lose, but presentation and packaging is. So today I want you to pull up maybe your top 2 or 3 listings from a few years ago. Be honest with yourself. Do the photos and the fonts look current? Do they look 2 years old, 3 years old? You might not have a copycat problem. You might just be needing a refresh. And a refresh, honestly, is a lot easier than having a price war with another person's listing. Now, the 5th worst piece of advice is this, and this one gets me fired up. Add a sticker to your listing as a loss leader so that the starting price looks lower in search results. Okay, that is not a loss leader. That is a bait and switch. You're deceiving the customer. You're making the product in the thumbnail photo look cheaper than it actually is in order to win the click. The customer clicks in and realizes that what they actually wanted costs a lot more. That creates a negative customer experience. So a real loss leader is not a trick that you hide in a listing's variations. A real loss leader is actually an entire listing, a genuinely great product at a great value that provides a great customer experience. This difference matters because one creates a buyer who comes back for years, and the other can create a buyer who is just disappointed. I want you to do this today. If you have a listing where your starting at price depends on a super cheap add-on that nobody actually wants, I want you to remove that deceptive variation. Build a real entry point product instead. And that kind of brings me to what a real loss leader actually looks like, which is point number 6 here. And this also gets me. Add some cheap items to your shop as loss leaders. Or someone will come to me and say, yeah, I'm doing the loss leader strategy and it's not working for me. And they think that loss leaders are just cheap items. And a cheap listing that doesn't sell is dead weight. So a good goal for a loss leader, your goal should be 20 orders per day per listing. The reason a loss leader works so well is because when you get that high order velocity, the number of orders per day on a listing, it will elevate the ranking of your other listings, your more expensive listings. A loss leader is low price point, low margin, built to sell year round, and pulls customers into everything else that you have in the shop. So if it's not doing the volume, it's not pulling its weight, no matter how low the price is. So today, I want you to look at the items that you might be calling your loss leader and ask the honest question. Is this an effective loss leader? Does it have mass appeal? Does it sell at least every single day? And if not, it's not your loss leader. All right, now the 7th piece of terrible advice is look to Etsy for product ideas. See what's trending on Etsy and then sell the same thing. And this feels logical. So people don't question it. But the trap is that by the time something is allegedly trending on Etsy, you're already late, 6 to 8 months late. So we have to remember Etsy is a lagging indicator. Trends show up there last, not first. So if your trend research process is, scrolling Etsy bestsellers, you're finding the tail end of trends that have already peaked somewhere else. So where do people who are early on trends actually look? I was a buyer, a corporate e-commerce buyer for Zappos and Zulily, and markets are a great place to look for trends. And when I say this, people assume farmers markets, like pop-up markets. No. I am talking about wholesale markets. So like industry level trade shows. These are the places where products start moving before they are ever on the shelves of a store. And this is where you see what is coming while there is still room for you to jump on it and win. So today, for your next products, don't open Etsy first. Instead, look at trade shows, wholesale catalogs, look at markets in the industry, and you can get on these trends before anyone else on Etsy does. Now, this last one is very interesting, and I'm not going to name any names here, but this is a piece of advice that I would highly not recommend. Using keyword research tools where they give you the search volume on Etsy of certain keywords. And this is uncomfortable because a lot of people have built their entire SEO strategy on this. This is what nobody talks about. The numbers don't actually come from Etsy. If you compare all the keyword research tools, maybe the same word across all of them will give you a different number. Why is that? Well, Etsy does not publish real search volume data through its API. I know this because I have an Etsy software company called Etsy. They are pulling that search volume data from their own data providers, and those are estimates. And you can prove it to yourself. Look up the exact same keyword on 3 to 4 different keyword research tool sites. See if the numbers match. And actually, neither is right because neither one is using Etsy's actual data. So I'm not saying never use, Etsy software. I have an Etsy software company. We don't claim estimates on search volume though. I will say that. So if you're going to do that, treat numbers as a rough, very, very rough signal. Honestly, I would rate your own customer understanding higher than what any tool is estimating the search volume is. So here's the main thread running through all of this advice that I wouldn't recommend following. A lot of it sounded really good, right? Especially in 2019, 2021, that type of advice that was popular, that people clung to in 2019, 2021, it is still perpetuating today. And if you're thinking here right now, like, well, how do I actually find products to sell if I'm not finding them on Etsy? That is something that I teach every day. And it's always part of my free training. So I would love to take this second to invite you to my next free class. It's a deep dive masterclass with myself. You can ask questions. I'll be auditing at least 5 shops of people who attend the class live. We give away free resources at it. So we'll put the link for you to register for your free spot in my class below. And I'd love to have you there. All right, everyone, I will see you over there or in my next video. Thanks, guys.